Hi, welcome to Bill Selak Talks. My name is Bill Selak. This is me talking. And not just talking, I'm also listening. The new Blink-182 album came out this week. It's weird to say the full name. I almost always say Blink. But I don't want to confuse anyone. The new Blink album came out this week, and all kinds of memories are coming back. The band's back together. Tom's back in. But this isn't necessarily about just whatever new album. What's interesting to me about their albums and them as a band connects directly with something that I believe deeply about in education. And it's the reason I think teaching is so hard when you're a good teacher, and why you can't just rinse and repeat lessons year after year. The very first Blink album was recorded in the same studio as someone I went to college with, Brian. Hey, Brian, if you're listening. Same studio in San Diego. And Brian and I graduated the same year with undergrads in music, and we kind of co-did our senior project. We signed a bunch of bands to a local label for this one project and recorded like a dozen songs. And so we talked a lot about recording, and he had way more experience than I did at the time. He's also just a really good musician. But he was sharing the story about how his band was recording their album in San Diego, punk rock band, early 90s, mid 90s. I guess it was early 90s. And the engineer commented, he was like, man, you guys are like, you know your songs, you know how to play your instruments, you're ready to go. It's just like, hit record, everything sounds great. He's like, this other band that was in here last week, these guys Blink, like, they just goofed around the whole time. Like, they didn't have their songs locked in. They wanted to just, like, record silly stuff. And he's like, those guys, man, those guys are going nowhere. But you guys, you got your stuff, like, you're good. You got the sound, you got, you know how the story ends, right? Like, Brian's band did not progress, and Blink continues to be, where are we, 30 years later, continuing to record music. I don't know, are they doing stadiums at this point? I've not seen them since smaller punk rock shows that are $10. Yeah, I think Mark down in San Diego is going to see them like at Petco Park. Is that right? I think it might be. Mark from the band Oxygen, shout out to Mark. Look at all these shout outs, not as though any of these humans are listening to my podcast, because they are not educators that believe deeply about education and all the things I talk about. I feel like they're not going to play Flippo's skate rink in San Luis Obispo, like one of the last times I saw them. But what strikes me not only is this contrast of like those guys were goofing around, but actually like why did they hit when Brian's band didn't hit? And I think there's lots and lots of reasons. The one that I want to dig into for just a few more minutes here is that I think they're just fine with being themselves. They're silly, they're goofy, they're inappropriate, and they just like doubled down on that as a band. And so that first album in the studio, they just like recorded like dumb jokes. Like, they weren't great at playing their instruments, but every time I've seen them, they have been fun to watch. And as they've gotten older, they've gotten really, really good at playing their instruments. I mean, it helps that you have a drummer that's just a phenomenal drummer. It's like when Travis joined the band, I think they really came together. But again, not the point of this episode. I think the point is that they just like didn't shy away from being who they were, didn't feel like they had to fit this like stereotypical punk rock band, like Ice Cube tray mold of like, this is what it means to act like a punk rock band, to sound like a punk rock band, and to perform like a punk rock band. There's like, we make inappropriate jokes, and we're gonna do that all day, every day on our albums, and even the latest album, like as my fifth grader would say, it's like a rating for TV shows. Like, there's sexual content and nudity conversations in one of the songs. they just like own it and go with it. And so what's the point with education? Well, I think there's two things. One of them is that a huge thing I got out of my leadership coaching over the last 2 years was to like identify what my values are and then figure out how to best live those out in my role as tech director at Hillbrook. And so, like a lot of kind of what we kept coming back to is that when I felt stuck on a thing, we talked about it in like a coaching session, it almost always in like 5 minutes was like, here is a situation or an experience or a thing that isn't honoring one of my values. And that's when I get stuck on it, is that like this thing matters to me greatly and this situation is pushing against that or is in direct opposition to that. And so a lot of what, just like looking back kind of a year ago when I was doing like, weekly coaching was, how can I be like the me-est me, or, how can you be the you-est you when it comes to this situation in your role, bigger picture in education? How can you show up as an authentic version of you, and how can I show up as like authentic Bill in a space? And I think when we show up in that way, we are doing our best work, we feel the most fulfilled, and we are happiest, and least stuck. And so I think that's kind of my takeaway personally and professionally. But then also the part two of this is looking at this from a student lens. And one thing that I continue to be proud of with what we do at Hillbrook is that students of all interests and abilities and capacities and interests, I guess, are able to thrive at our school. You don't have to be just the athletic person or just the advanced in math person. You can be the I'm really interested in Lego person, I suppose. And I think each of those students, each of those personalities are able to be successful at our school and thrive in life because of that. And I think that takes a lot of work to personalize learning so that you're able to do that, to really say we are going to personalize the learning experience and really try and own that. And then just really trying to give students space in the school day to be able to pursue more of what they want. So it's less about the curriculum and it's more about their interests. And I think the more we can do that, the better off our students are going to be. I think the better off we're going to be. And I think that, as I listen to the latest Blink album, a lot of what strikes me is that they continue to be who they are. They continue to be, despite being, I think they're in their mid to late 40s, early 50s at this point. Oh, good Lord. And continue to be just silly, immature, playing their style of music in their own way. And I have no doubt that when they are doing their latest concerts, shows? Do we call them concerts now? I feel like they're doing concerts and not punk rock shows. I still call them shows. When they do their shows, they will be doing it in their own way, with their own style. And I think we can learn a lot from that way of living. Not to say that any of us are going to be selling out arenas. If they are. But I think there's something to that. Being the you-est you, being your authentic self, giving space for students to be the they-est thems and their most authentic selves. And I think that there's something there. Yeah. So check out the new Blink album if you haven't. Although, parental warning, there is talks of sexual content and nudity, as my fifth grader would say. Because that's just who they are. But it's a good album, super well produced, and that is all I have for you. My name is Bill Selak. This has been me talking.